say you're burned out. But what does that even mean anymore? Everyone is burned out. Everyone is tired, drained, disconnected. It's become the default setting, like being exhausted is just part of existing now. But what if we're not actually burned out in the way we think? What if something else is happening? Something deeper, something more subtle, and far more dangerous. Think about this. When was the last time your mind was truly still? Not distracted, not entertained, not numbed, just still. We wake up and the stimulation begins. Lights, sounds, screens, information, expectations. Before our feet even touch the ground, we're already plugged in, already consuming, already performing. Burnout used to be something that happened to people under extreme pressure. Surgeons, soldiers, emergency responders, people whose lives were chaos. But now, it's your barista, your classmate, your mom, your best friend, you. Because the pressure never turns off. It doesn't come in waves anymore. It's constant. This isn't burnout. Not really. Burnout implies that you worked so hard, you used up all your fuel. But most of us aren't doing hard labor. We're not running marathons or fighting fires. We're scrolling. We're switching between apps. We're jumping from one task to the next before the last one is even finished. Our bodies are still, but our minds are sprinting. You don't need rest because you've exerted yourself. You need rest because you've been overwhelmed with meaningless motion, mental clutter that's impossible to process in real time. Your nervous system isn't designed for this much input, this many lights, this many sounds, this much data. We've overstimulated ourselves into emotional paralysis. You say you're tired, but you're not physically tired. You're emotionally fragmented. Your soul feels like it's been stretched across 1,000 tiny demands, and none of them ever stop. There's always another message, another alert, another expectation, and through all of it, you're supposed to smile. You're supposed to perform. You're supposed to have your life together. But what if the real sickness isn't your exhaustion, but the system that never lets you stop? What if the burnout isn't a personal failure, but a natural response to an unnatural world? You don't need motivation. You need stillness. You don't need to try harder. You need to unplug. You don't need to be more productive. You need to feel safe doing nothing. You keep telling yourself to push through, that it's just a phase, that maybe a break this weekend will help, a vacation, a detox, some self-care checklist. But deep down, you know that none of it truly resets you. It doesn't last, because the second you return, the noise floods back in. The scrolling, the deadlines, the pressure to be relevant, to be responsive, to be seen. We weren't designed for this kind of constant mental noise. Our ancestors spent most of their lives in silence, in nature, in rhythm with the sun, the seasons, the body. They weren't being bombarded with thousands of micro-decisions every hour. They weren't choosing between 10 podcasts, 30 emails, or 100 opinions before breakfast. Now, we call this progress. We celebrate how much we can consume, how fast we can respond. But beneath that hyper-productivity is a nervous system that is barely holding it together. This is overstimulation. And overstimulation doesn't feel loud. It feels like numbness. It feels like staring at the wall after hours on your phone and realizing you don't even know what you just saw. It feels like your attention is broken. Your emotions feel distant. You feel distant. You're not tired because your body is overworked. You're tired because your senses have been hijacked. Hijacked by dopamine, by novelty, by endless alerts that pretend to be urgent, but leave you emptier each time. You feel anxious, not because there's danger, but because your mind never lands. It floats, constantly reacting, constantly waiting, constantly absorbing, and so you become distant, not just from the world, but from yourself. You no longer know what you feel because you haven't been still long enough to listen. You no longer know what you believe because every voice online has replaced your own. This isn't laziness. This isn't weakness. It's a silent scream from your nervous system begging for silence. And if you ignore it long enough, your body will find ways to force stillness. Through sickness, through breakdown, through collapse. Overstimulation doesn't look like chaos on the outside. It's silent. It looks like scrolling through dozens of videos, not remembering a single one. It looks like your brain blinking mid-sentence because the thought stream collapsed under its own weight. And worse, it feels normal because everyone else is experiencing the same thing. So we don't call it overstimulation. We call it being busy. We call it modern life. But your biology doesn't know that. Your nervous system doesn't care if it's 2025 or 1825. It only knows input and output. It only understands safety and threat. So when it's being flooded, hour after hour, day after day, with content, decisions, lights, stories, images, arguments, clickbait, and constant stimulation, it doesn't interpret that as modern convenience. It interprets it as danger, and when the brain detects prolonged danger, it shuts down non-essential systems. That's why your creativity is gone. That's why your curiosity feels dull. That's why you can't enjoy silence anymore. Because your body is in defense mode, always scanning, never resting. You're not uninspired. You're overwhelmed. You're not emotionally dead. You're emotionally flooded. You're not failing. You're surviving. And the irony is, our search for relief is often the very thing making us worse. We reach for stimulation to escape overstimulation. We scroll to escape the noise and find more noise. We try to feel better through the same system that made us feel broken in the first place. And so we spiral, not in one dramatic crash, but in slow, silent numbness. Our sense of self thins out. We stop asking deep questions. We stop feeling awe. We lose touch with wonder. This is the real cost of overstimulation, not just exhaustion, but disconnection from the very things that make us human. Because when your nervous system is always bracing, there's no space for softness, no space for joy, no space for stillness. You start to wonder why silence feels so threatening, why being alone with your thoughts creates more discomfort than any external noise ever could. The truth is, we've lost the ability to just be, to sit with discomfort, to let boredom exist, to feel without filtering, to notice a thought without judging it, reshaping it, or running from it. Because stillness reveals what the noise was hiding. And the noise, it's never just content. It's a shield, a filter, a wall between you and yourself. When the noise stops, the unresolved things begin to speak. The loneliness, the shame, the questions you've buried beneath playlists and productivity. So we reach for stimulation not because it's meaningful, but because it's familiar, because distraction is safer than depth, and because we're terrified of the silence. But here's the shift. That silence is not your enemy. It's your only access point to clarity. Because when you remove the noise, something else begins to rise. Your real thoughts, your real feelings, the truth that's been whispering beneath the surface for far too long. And at first, it feels raw, uncomfortable, unfiltered, because the nervous system, so used to hyperactivity, doesn't know how to simply rest. But if you stay with it, if you breathe through it, if you allow it, that stillness becomes a doorway, not just to peace, but to power, because presence is powerful. And in a world addicted to speed and stimulation, nothing is more radical, more rebellious, than slowing down enough to feel real life again. You've been taught that healing looks like doing more, fixing more, trying harder. But sometimes, healing begins by stopping. stopping the scroll, stopping the search, stopping the story that says you need to be on all the time, and just listening. Stillness is uncomfortable, but it is also sacred. It's where the noise ends and the knowing begins. And maybe that's what you've been missing all along. Not more motivation, not more hacks, not more content, but silence, spaciousness, room to breathe. When you begin to turn down the volume of the outside world, you realize your inner world was never broken, just buried, drowned under the pressure to produce, perform, please. You're not lazy, you're tired of pretending you're fine, tired of pretending you're okay with a life that feels like a constant sprint toward nothing. And that is the beginning, not the end, not the breakdown, but the moment you finally stop running. That's when your nervous system gets a chance to reset, to uncoil, to soften. You start to notice small things, the way the light falls on the wall, the rhythm of your breath, the tension in your jaw. And these tiny moments, so ordinary, so overlooked, become sacred because they are real, they are yours, they exist outside of algorithms and notifications. And from that stillness, something ancient begins to return, a sense of wholeness, not because everything is perfect, but because you're finally present. You realize you don't need to be more. You need to remember who you were before the noise convinced you otherwise. And that version of you, the quiet one, the grounded one, the one who listens instead of reacts, that version was never gone, only waiting. You've spent so long running that you've forgotten what it feels like to just stop, to sit in stillness without guilt, to take a breath that isn't rushed, to feel the weight of your own existence without reaching for something to dull it. And maybe that's why the noise was so addictive, because silence felt like absence, like a void. But now, you understand. Silence is not empty. It's full of everything you've been avoiding. It's where the truth lives, the raw, unfiltered version of you, the parts of you that were too tender to be exposed in a world obsessed with constant output. It's in this stillness that the healing begins, not from fixing or performing, but from finally being seen by yourself. Your exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was a boundary crossed too many times, a signal from your nervous system that enough is enough. You don't need more productivity tools. You don't need to hustle harder. You need permission to rest, to recover, to remember that you were never meant to live like this. You were meant to live in rhythm, to work and then to restore, to speak and then to listen, to move and then to be still. This isn't about escaping life. It's about returning to it, because the world you want, the clarity, the peace, the connection, it doesn't live at the end of a to-do list. It lives here, in the breath you've been holding, in the emotion you've been suppressing, in the silence you've been afraid of. It's all been waiting for you. So unplug, turn down the volume, close the loop, reclaim your presence. You're not behind, you're not late, you're exactly where you need to be. And in this moment, right now, there's nothing to chase, no one to impress, no algorithm to please, just you, finally you. And as the world keeps spinning, faster and louder, you get to choose something different. Stillness, presence, clarity, truth. You're not burned out, you're overstimulated, and you're allowed to heal.